Hey everybody, and welcome back to another review here at Electric Bike Report. I'm Griffin Hales, and today I have with me the Himiway Big Dog. I'm pretty excited to tell you all about this bike as it has a lot going on for it, and of course because the styling of this bike is kind of that moped or mini moto look to it that a lot of people ask us about and a lot of people are clamoring for. Now, Himiway actually builds this as a cargo bike. That's thanks in part to the rear rack here with a very wide platform and a very generous 400-pound payload capacity. And no Himiway bike would be complete without a powerful motor and all-day battery life, which this bike has in spades. I'm excited to show you everything it's capable of, so let's go ahead and dive into our testing and review. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, this is a bike with a very signature look and style. Moped style e-bikes like this absolutely have a market. So much so, in fact, that certain brands operate exclusively with this type of frame. They offer multiple bikes with just this kind of look and feel to it. Now, Himiway, this is actually their second time making a moped style e-bike. They also have the Himiway Escape, which we tested out a little over a year ago, and it had a lot that we liked on it, especially for kind of like a first attempt at this style. Most notably, it had a really cool rear coil suspension system that we liked. The alloy wheels just fit the overall aesthetic, and it was pretty good for just kind of like hopping on, and if you didn't really want to pedal very much, it was just so friendly to hitting that throttle and going. Now, it did have some drawbacks though, some things that I wasn't in love with. Most notably, it had a kind of a smaller battery. You couldn't adjust the seat height at all, so it wasn't very friendly for riders of different sizes. And then the rear rack on it was very short and not very usable. Now, with the Big Dog here, it is largely spec'd to be the upgraded version of the Himiway Escape. And they addressed a lot of those things that I didn't like from last time. Obviously, you can see here that this seat does adjust up and down. The rear rack in the back is very wide. It's very easy to put different crates or containers on here. Makes it very helpful for carrying cargo. And then of course, the most notable thing is the battery housed in the down tube here is massive. It's 960 watt hours. It's very large, and we're gonna tell you all about how it holds up in our range test a little bit later on. Now, interestingly, while it is kind of that moped or mini moto look to it, Himiway builds this bike as a cargo e-bike, which at first I was a little confused about, but it made more sense as I spent more time on this bike. Again, you have the wide rear rack, 400-pound payload capacity, but the style of it just lends itself to being a pretty good cargo carrier overall. It has wider tires. It's a little bit of a heavier bike, but that lower center of gravity helps you feel planted and secure, not like you're gonna jostle things around too much. And it makes it just pretty good ride. I think it's very capable on the cargo front. Not only that, but I think overall, this is a very capable commuter. This can be the thing that you use to ditch your car. The reason I say that is because if you are the type who wants to just hop on and throttle it, you can. You can of course pedal it too, and then you can take just about anything with you that you need to. All in all, adds up pretty well. Now the Big Dog, like all bikes of course, does have a few different drawbacks to it and a few things I wouldn't mind changing in the future. Most notably, you can adjust the angle a little bit of the handlebars, but I do wish it had a little bit more of a sweep, a little bit more of a rise to it to help it feel even more comfortable for me, at least with my 6'1" height. Also, there's the drivetrain setup on this. We'll dive into that a little bit more later on. It is a Shimano 7-speed. I did find that the gearing on it with the 46-tooth chainring in the front and the 14 to 28 T in the rear was just a little perhaps undersized because around 17, 18 miles per hour, the pedals start to feel a little bit spinny, and then by 20 miles per hour, you're kind of full on ghost pedaling, but it's not bad overall because you do have the ability to get to that 20 mile per hour limit, which this bike is capable of. And then the only other thing that I was a little bit sad to see is it doesn't have the same rear coil suspension that the Himiway Escape did. It was something that I liked almost for the look as much as the function. They dropped that off here, which of course that does kind of help save money overall and shave a little bit of weight. And where they're actually trying to make this a cargo bike, that might not be the worst thing that they took rear suspension off, because there's an argument for not having rear suspension on cargo bikes. Now, all of that aside, and even with some of the drawbacks that I have here, it's still a very compelling package for around $2,000 that this is going for right now. And what helps fuel and drive that for me is just the utility, the really large battery, and the really fun motor. Now we're gonna go ahead and dive into the specs a little bit more in detail so that we can get a clearer picture of what you're getting with the money that you're paying here. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So starting off some of the more notable spec on the Himiway Big Dog, as I mentioned before, this is an e-bike capable of 20 mile per hour or class 2 e-bike speeds, and that is provided by the rear hub motor here. It's a 750 watt Bafang hub motor capable of 86 Newton meters of torque. A hallmark of Himiway e-bikes is that they are very powerful and very fast. That's going to prove true. Stay tuned for that in our circuit and hill tests later on. I mentioned it already, but just again, very large 960 watt hour battery. That's the type of battery you want with such a large and powerful motor. It's going to provide you with all day battery life. Over in the handlebar area here, now this is where it's kind of a little bit basic and bare bones. Himiway, I think, put the value in some of the other things like the electrical components. The handlebar's just kind of, it's a little bit basic. You have some faux leather grips on either side. It's got a above the bar Shimano 7-speed shifter. And then it of course has the half twist grip throttle there. Ordinarily I love lever throttles, but it absolutely just kind of fits what this bike is going for with that twist grip, and it's been very responsive. In the middle here is this LCD display. It is a black and white, fairly utilitarian display. It'll show you your battery life, your miles per hour, and your odometer and things like that. It's not very fancy or high tech, but again, I don't think it really needs to be. This bike is all about kind of look, feel, and just the flow when you're out there on the roads. And that I think it largely achieves in spades. Now, Himiway says that this bike will fit riders from 5 foot all the way to 6'2". As a 6'1" rider, I think I was okay overall. It wasn't the most comfortable bike. I do wish that I could move the handlebars up and down a little bit, but it does let you rotate them closer towards you to kind of help with comfort in that regards. All the other contact points, such as the seat, they're okay. And you do get a front fork up here that helps provide a little bit of help on the roads as it absorbs some of that chatter. It does have a lockout option with it as well. Now, this bike overall weighs about 79 pounds. That's pretty heavy even by e-bike standards. But as I mentioned before, I think it actually kind of works for what this bike's trying to achieve. It feels good out there on the roads. You feel very planted and secure. That's largely thanks to these very large 20-inch by 4-inch wide Kenda Crusade tires. I like these tires. They've been rolling pretty well for me, do a good job of holding speed. And they've got a little bit of a tread pattern here, so you can probably hit some compact dirt and things like that. Now, I've hit, I think, enough of the major specs that most people will care about. If there is anything that I have left out though, I'll leave a link down in the description below that will take you back to the Electric Bike Report website where we will detail all the specs of this bike there. But for right now, let's go ahead and get into our testing to show you how these components performed in the real world. Now, thanks to e-bikes motors, e-bikes are capable of going at very fun and fast speeds, but it's important to have the counterbalance in place to bring all that speed to a stop. So we put the Himiway Big Dog through a brake test. Now here at EBR for our brake test, what we do is we take this bike out, bring it up to 20 miles per hour and come to a complete stop as quickly and safely as we can. And we do this multiple times so that we can get an overall average stopping distance to help paint the picture a little bit of how this bike does. So in our official test results, the Himiway Big Dog got an average stopping distance of 22 feet and 4 inches. Overall, it's a pretty okay result. If you've been following the channel for a while, you know that we recently altered how we did our brake test. We used to do full-blown panic stops where we were getting out of the saddle, throwing all of our weight back and coming to a stop. Now we do something a little more realistic where we just stay seated and squeeze as hard as we can while keeping the bike square. And like I said, it's an okay result. I did kind of hope that it would have had hydraulic disc brakes on here for a couple of different reasons. Again, its starting weight of nearly 80 pounds is pretty heavy for an e-bike, and where this has the appeal of 400 pounds of payload capacity, if you're a larger rider or if you do plan on putting a lot of cargo on here and adding to that weight, a little bit better braking power would have been nice. As for right now, it's an okay result. It's on that kind of like okay to good border right there. But if in the future they upgrade the brakes, I'll be very happy with it. So in the meantime, let's move on to our next test. Now, as we're testing out motors on e-bikes, we like to get a sense of whether or not a rider can dial in their preferred speed. So what we do is we put it on a circuit test. Now here at EBR, the circuit is a 1 mile loop consisting of 4 right-hand turns and a small 30-foot climb. We will do this in each of the e-bike's pedal assist settings and one time with the motor completely off so we can see how well it rolls with just rider power versus motor power. Now I was pretty happy with the results that we got here. Without any motor assistance at all, I got about 11.6 miles per hour, and as soon as I put it in PAS1, we saw it jump up to 13.1 mile per hour averages. From there, it kept making jumps of 2 to 3 mile per hour increments up till 4 and 5, which were actually identical, surprisingly. I actually love to see this, that 2 or 3 mile per hour jump. Always makes me very happy as riders who feel safer at different speeds can kind of like dial that in and find the speed they feel most comfortable at. And overall, I think the motor engage is great. It's got a good acceleration. It's not jarring or doesn't kick your head back in any unpleasant way. But it is also worth noting that on this bike, it's the type of bike you always want to make sure you have motor power on. Make sure those batteries are fully charged. It was not very fun to pedal without any motor because of the 80-pound weight and of course the 4-inch wide tires. But with some motor assistance, it's actually a very fun ride. I think it handles speed well, handles cornering quite nicely with the wider tires, and overall it's pretty good. As I mentioned before, the gearing I think could be a little bit larger. It gets a little spinny around 17, 18 miles per hour. Hardly a deal breaker though, since it's a cadence sensor e-bike. That motor will still kick in if you're ghost pedaling a little bit. But overall, very comfortable motor. I'm very happy with the speed performance on this bike. Now, one of the #1 questions from any e-bike buyer is how far will a given e-bike go on its battery? And that's the question we set out to solve by doing a range test. So here at EBR, we do this test 2 different times. We get the bike fully charged up and we take it out once using only the maximum amount of motor assistance to establish our floor, and once using the minimum amount of motor assistance to establish our ceiling. This will kind of give you real world values and an idea of what range you can expect. So with the Big Dog, we got between 37 miles and 47 miles. Now the 47 miles does have a couple of notes on it. We did have the tires start leaking a little bit during that range test, so we had to stop and refill them a couple of different times there towards the end. Since we have limited time with the bike, we weren't able to redo it on this one. But I'd say that 47 miles is definitely on the conservative side. I can easily see this bike getting 50 miles or more, just kind of given some of those variables. Not only that, but the route we were on for that one had more elevation than usual. Usually we get somewhere between 800 to 1,000 feet of elevation. On this particular one, we got over 2,000. So it's a lot of testament to the battery on this, that it held up through a lot of miles and some pretty steep climbs. Now, not only that, but it is worth noting, I performed the 37-mile test and I noticed that this bike really up till the end gives it its all. A lot of bikes will kind of start slowing down speed as you get down to that last remaining bar in like a noticeable way. This one I felt was giving it 100% right up until it actually died on me. So I was really happy to see that. I think that people looking at the Big Dog can feel comfortable knowing that they're gonna have very, very good battery life, the type that will take you days and days at a time between having to recharge. For our final test, we have our hill test. Here at EBR, we take all the bikes we review out to Hellhole, which is about 1/3 of a mile long with a 12% average grade. This is a very steep and extreme case of the hill. Very few riders are gonna have something like this on their daily commute, but we do this because we wanna see what those motors can do when they're pushed to their absolute limit. Now, we do this test 2 different times. We do it once using throttle only, and then once pedaling with maximum motor assistance. We do this kind of get the speed and the overall times just to help us get a clearer picture of what this thing can do on the hills. And I am very pleasantly surprised with the results that we had on this bike. Our throttle time was a time of 1 minute 17 seconds with a 14.1 mile per hour average. And then on max PAS, we saw a time of 1 minute 7 seconds with 16.2 miles per hour. Now, again, that is great, great results. That's actually in the upper tier for both throttle and PAS tests, right around the top 10 actually. So it was a little surprising, again, just considering a few different factors on this bike, be it the 20-inch by 4-inch tires or the fact that it is a little bit limited on the gearing for the PAS, but it just really speaks volumes to the fact that Himiway has dialed this one in to help you get to the top of the hills. That motor is absolutely going to push, it opens up, and will make sure you get to the top of almost any reasonable hill. Not only that, but where Himiway has built this as a cargo e-bike, I actually like to see a little bit of that extra motor power. You're not always going to be riding around in the highest level of assist, but it's good to know that if you are carrying something and your legs are just not able to get to the top of the hill, the motor is absolutely going to do the job all by its own if you need it to. So I see this being a lot of fun for a lot of different people. For anyone swinging a leg over the Himiway Big Dog, you're going to enjoy the motor. My biggest takeaway from my time on the Himiway Big Dog would be this. This bike has a signature aesthetic to it that a lot of people are clamoring for. And with a bike with certain looks like this one has, there's a certain expectation for the type of ride quality and performance. And I think Himiway is able to deliver on that here. It is a bike that's so easy to just swing a leg over with that low step over height, hop on the saddle and then just cruise. Ordinarily, I like to pedal a lot on e-bikes, but the styling of this one just kind of lends itself to leaning into that throttle. And thanks to the very big 960 watt-hour battery, you can ride around on throttle and get a lot of miles on this knowing that the battery is going to be able to take you places. Now, there's a lot more that I feel this bike did well. That motor was a hill climbing champion, as we saw, and that is confidence inspiring knowing that if you are taking advantage of the 400-pound payload capacity as either a larger rider or someone carrying a lot of cargo on the wide rear rack, that this motor is going to be able to propel you to the top of most any hill and take over for when your legs start feeling tired. Now, of course, like any e-bike, there are a few drawbacks and certain things that were just kind of so-so in my book. The LCD display is pretty basic, the brakes are mechanical and not hydraulic, and the gearing on it could maybe be a little bit larger in my book to help you spin and enjoy pedaling up to 20 miles per hour. But again, those are all okay or like good enough for me. I think the value of that roughly $2,000 price point is in the utility of this bike and the motor. The utility, again, comes from the fact that this can replace your daily vehicle. It has the fenders, it has the front suspension fork, big headlight in the front, and rear integrated taillights. It all makes it a very viable option for taking day in and day out. Now, if you have found this review helpful, please consider giving this video a like. If you haven't yet, subscribe to the Electric Bike Report channel, and we will leave links in the description below where you can navigate for current pricing as well as a full detailed written review back at the EBR website. Again, I'm Griffin Hales, and we'll see you on the next review.